Hey everyone, and welcome back to Strength Foundation. All right, if you're deep in the books for your NSCA CPT exam, you know what I'm talking about. Chapter 4, Biomechanics. It can feel a little bit like a surprise physics test you didn't sign up for, right? But here's the deal. We're going to break it all down today. This isn't just about memorizing facts to pass the test. This is about getting that aha moment. Understanding the real why behind every single exercise. This is the stuff that takes you from a good trainer to a great one. So think about this for a second. Why is a squat just worlds apart from a leg extension? I mean, they both torture quads, right? So what's the real difference? Or how about this? You're doing a bicep curl, and there's always that one spot, that one point in the middle where it feels like you're gonna fail. Why is that? Well, the answer to all those questions, it all comes down to biomechanics. And yeah, that sounds like a big, scary word, but it's really just the physics of how we move. The best way to think about it, it's the user manual for the human body. It tells you why things work the way they do. And trust me, once you get this, it becomes your secret weapon as a coach. All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. To really understand any of this, we've got to start with the three big building blocks. Everything else we're going to talk about comes from these three ideas: force, torque, and work. And for the exam, yeah, you absolutely have to know these cold. So, first up, force. Super simple, right? It's just a push or a pull. In the gym, you've got two main forces battling it out. You've got the force your muscles are generating to lift the weight, and then you've got the force of gravity, which is always trying to pull that weight right back to the floor. Resistance training is basically just that constant battle. Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. Force doesn't just move things in a straight line, not in our bodies anyway. It causes rotation around our joints. And that rotational force is called torque. You'll also see it called a moment of force. The formula is key. Torque equals force times the moment arm. Now, what the heck is a moment arm? Just think of it as the lever. It's the distance from the pivot point, so your joint, to wherever the force is being applied. The longer that moment arm, the more torque you're dealing with, and the harder that lift is going to feel. It's that simple. And this picture of the bicep curl is the perfect example. Just look at it. The dumbbell is the force. The elbow is the pivot point. That horizontal distance from the elbow out to the dumbbell, that's your moment arm. See how it changes throughout the lift? It gets longer and longer until it's at its absolute longest, right when your forearm is parallel to the floor. That's the point of maximum torque. And that is exactly why that part of the curl is the hardest. That's your sticking point. Okay, and the last of our big three is mechanical work. The math here is as simple as it gets. It's just force multiplied by distance. So if your client lifts a 100-pound barbell 2 feet up, you've done 200 foot-pounds of work. It's just a clean, simple way to measure how much you've actually accomplished in a lift. Okay, so we have force, we have torque. How does the body actually use them to create movement? Well, it all comes down to levers. Your body is basically just a really, really cool system of levers. Your bones are the levers, your joints are the pivots, and your muscles provide the force. And getting how these levers work, man, that's everything when it comes to picking the right exercises. Now, there are a few different types of levers, but let's check out a second-class lever first. The setup is simple. You've got the pivot point, or fulcrum, on one end, the effort from the muscle on the other end, and the resistance, or the load, is sitting right in the middle. The big takeaway here is that this gives you a mechanical advantage. It basically makes you stronger, letting your muscle move a heavy load with less effort. In the classic textbook example, in the body, a standing calf raise. I mean, look at this. The ball of your foot is the pivot point, the fulcrum. Your entire body weight is the resistance, acting right through your ankle. And the effort, that's your calf muscle, pulling up from the back. That mechanical advantage is the only reason your calf muscles can lift your entire body. Pretty cool, right? All right, now for the main event, the third-class lever. You need to know this one because it is by far the most common lever in your entire body. So here the setup is flipped. You've got the joint on one end and the weight on the other, and the muscle, the effort, is in between them. Now, this puts us at a mechanical disadvantage, but there's a trade-off. What we lose in pure force, we gain in speed and range of motion. Let's go back to our friend, the bicep curl. It's a perfect third-class lever. Your biceps muscle attaches to your forearm really close to your elbow, so its moment arm is tiny. Compare that to the moment arm of the dumbbell way out in your hand. Because of that difference, your bicep has to generate way, way more force than the actual weight of that dumbbell. That's the disadvantage. Our bodies are built for speed, not for brute force efficiency. Okay, so now we get how levers work in the body. But what about the muscle itself? What determines how much force it can actually crank out? Because it's not just about gritting your teeth and trying harder, right? There are some real physiological rules at play here. The first big one is the force-velocity relationship. And you can see it right here in this curve. The takeaway is pretty straightforward. When a muscle is contracting concentrically, when it's shortening, force and velocity are inversely related. Basically, they're opposites. You can lift something really heavy, but you have to do it slowly. Or you can move something really fast, but it has to be light. You can't lift a super heavy weight super fast. The physics just don't allow it. And as a trainer, this is huge for your programming. This isn't just theory. If your client wants to get maximally strong, what do? You program heavy weights, and the reps are naturally going to be slow. But if their goal is power, say they want to jump higher, you're going to use lighter weights and tell them to move as explosively as possible. This curve is literally the reason we train for strength and power differently. The other big rule for muscle force is the length-tension relationship. Think of this as the Goldilocks principle for muscles. A muscle can generate its most force when it's not too long and not too short, but just right around its normal resting length. If you stretch a muscle all the way out, it's weak. If you shorten it all the way, it's also weak. There's a sweet spot in the middle of the range of motion where it's at its strongest. All right, we've gone through all the theory, force, torque, levers, how muscles work. Now for the fun part. Let's take all this science and bring it right onto the gym floor. How does this stuff actually apply to a real workout? This is where it all clicks. So we've mentioned this before, but let's really nail down the definition of the sticking point. You know what it is. It's that exact spot in a lift where everything gets heavy and you feel like you might fail. Well, biomechanically, there's a reason for that. It happens at the point of greatest torque, which, as we now know, is where the moment arm for the weight is at its absolute longest. And knowing where that point is, that's critical for coaching someone through it. And there's no better example than the squat. Think about it. When you're at the very bottom of the squat, with your thighs parallel to the floor, that horizontal distance from the barbell to your hips and knees is as long as it's going to get. That means maximum torque. That means it's the hardest part of the lift. So when you see your client hit that spot, what's your cue? Drive. Explode through it. You're coaching them through the biomechanically hardest point. Okay, one last major concept, kinematic chains. And it's actually pretty simple. You've got open chain and closed chain. In an open chain exercise, the end of your limb moves freely in space. Think about your hand in a bicep curl, or your foot in a leg extension. Now, in a closed chain exercise, the end of the limb is fixed against something. Think about your feet planted on the floor during a squat, or your hands gripping the bar for a pull-up. This distinction is super important, especially when you're designing programs or working with someone coming back from an injury. All right, team, let's bring it all home. If you're studying for the exam, this slide right here is your cheat sheet. Seriously, take a picture of it. You have to know these things. Torque equals force times moment arm. Our bodies are mostly third-class levers. The faster you move, the less force you produce. Muscles are strongest in the middle of their range. The sticking point is where torque is highest. And you gotta know the difference between open and closed chain exercises. If you can explain these 6 things, you are golden for this part of the exam. And look, at the end of the day, this is about so much more than just passing your test. This is what separates the good trainers from the truly great ones. When you understand biomechanics, you're not just a rep counter anymore. You become a movement professional. You understand the why. You can build smarter, safer, and way more effective workouts for your clients. So really dive into this stuff. It'll pay off big time. Thanks for hanging out, and go absolutely crush that exam.